It's been more than 200 years since Canada and the United States fought a war against each other, and if it ever happens again, it's not going to be over the important issues, like who has the best pancakes or the best version of Chris Farley. It'll be over something that has divided not just North America, but the entire world for over a century. Which screwdriver is best, the Canadian Robertson head or the American Phillips head? Now, while screwdrivers are among the most common household tools today, this is no casual choice between a square and an X. These two types of drivers are deeply embedded into the respective cultures through a dark past that includes involvement of two of the worst armed conflicts in recorded history and an incident involving the most powerful industrialist of the age who sought to kill his competition to save a mere $2.65. In this video, I'll tell a short and fascinating version of the story, and I'll explain why Americans are still suffering today because of the screwdriver wars of a century ago. It all began with a Canadian salesman named Peter Robertson. In an era where it seemed like everyone was trying to invent a better mousetrap, Robertson patented a few of his own ideas, including a mousetrap of all things, and a fancy corkscrew that nobody needed. Then one day, while he was demonstrating a spring-loaded screwdriver for a skeptical audience, the flat-headed bit slipped from the slot in the screw head and badly cut one of his best nose pickers. Now, being a Canadian, the first thing he did after presumably telling his screwdriver he was sorry and taking a shot of maple syrup to dull the pain was he started tinkering with some new ideas for a better screwdriver. Of course, he wasn't the first guy with this screwy idea. A lot of folks before him had already been driven to the task, including an American named Alan Cummings. Most people don't know that Cummings invented the square screwdriver 30 years before the man who gave his name to it. Besides for what would become known as the square Robertson drive, Cummings also patented a retro triangular drive and a square slot combo, sort of a 3-for-1 deal of questionable ideas. Why was the original square screwdriver a questionable idea? Because the manufacturing process involved stamping the recessed shape with a die, which had the unfortunate effect of deforming and weakening the screw head itself. Like many otherwise good ideas, this one simply proved impractical to manufacture on a large scale. So that's when Robertson came along. He improved upon Cummings' idea by tapering the sides of the square recess like a pyramid, a shape that could be stamped into the screw without deforming its head, just like the Egyptians would have done if they had screwdrivers. That was Robertson's real contribution to the industry, not the idea of a square drive, but a way to make them quickly and cheaply by the billions. And for that, he got to slap his name on it, and soon he was marketing his screws all over the Great White North as a solution for everything that was wrong with screwdrivers. Robertson was a slick salesman, but his screwdriver was also objectively better. The square head is self-aligning and self-centering, making it faster and easier to operate the screwdriver with a single hand. The tool was also far less likely to slip or cam out and damage the material around the screw. Furniture makers, boat builders, anyone that worked on slippery things like butter churns and banana peelers loved the idea of a more secure match between screw and screwdriver. But do you know who else didn't like the idea? The Kaiser and his minions sweeping a path of destruction through Europe. Actually, both sides of World War I needed plenty of screws, and Robertson tried his darndest to make his square drive the choice of every Fritz, Tommy, and Doughboy in Europe. Sadly, many just considered a Canadian screw a bit knuckleheaded. But as the war closed, Robertson's idea caught the interest of automobile magnate and noted cheapskate Henry Ford, when it was calculated that by using Robertson screws, he could reduce the cost of a Model A car by almost $3. So Ford made Robertson an offer he couldn't refuse, including an exclusive contract to sell only to them and the privilege of letting Ford dictate how they run their business and make their screws. Robertson refused, and the result was that he lost out on the US auto market, but also he lost the Canadian auto market and a third of his business. Now, this was the second failure to license his screw design outside Canada, and from that day forward, Robertson vowed that his screw would remain a product primarily for the Great White North. Even today, a century after Ford all but killed the Robertson screw, Canadians love their square heads like they love their pet polar bears, and hardly an igloo in the land isn't held together by their beloved Robbies. Of course, the auto industry wasn't going to just go back to the plain, flat-headed, hand-gouging slotted screws. They still needed a better solution. And that came a few years later with the development of a clever X or cruciform-shaped design, which we all know today as the iconic Friesen head. You heard me. History is full of lies. It was Cummings, not Robertson, who invented the square head, and it was Friesen, not Phillips, who invented the cruciform head. John Friesen was an English inventor who patented his idea in the 1880s. But like Cummings before him, his idea was later improved upon by an American named John P. Thompson, and later brought closer to imperfection by his business partner, Henry Phillips. So finally, America had its own screw, designed by Americans, after originally being designed by an Englishman. But we know how to take credit in this country, and it was the third man in the process, Henry Phillips, who gave his name to what would become the most popular pour design in the fastener world. The rise of the Phillips screw was largely due to the same forces that turned against Robertson. In the late 1930s, the auto industry adopted the design. When the industry switched from making cars to making planes and other weapons of World War II, Phillips screws went into everything. So when the Allied soldiers returned home, they demanded the same types of tools that they were using on the battlefield. And by the middle of the century, everyone seemed to be using Phillips, not just here in the US, but in many other countries as well. Phillips is not a perfect screw design by any stretch. They suffer from several significant flaws, including a frustrating tendency to cam out, the driver popping out of the recess. Remember, that was the main problem that Robertson originally set out to solve. And who among us hasn't experienced a Phillips bit popping out of a screw head and stabbing us in the finger, much like the accident that started the screwdriver war back in 1900? But as it turned out, the world had changed by the age of the Phillips, and what was once seen as a flaw began to be viewed as a necessary feature for the pre-war manufacturing industry. A Robertson head might snap right off the screw as it was seated tightly in its hole. A Phillips screwdriver, on the other hand, could cam out of the screw as it became tight, preventing overdriving, if also increasing the chances of marring the area around the screw. So the debate continues. Even today, Canadians stubbornly hold on to their Robertson screws as hard as Americans do their feet. They repeat the same argument, that the Robertson screwdrivers are more secure in the screw recess, that they don't strip and ruin the screw like a Phillips bit often can, that they can be held on the driver more easily for one-handed operation, and so on. Meanwhile, we Americans still try to classify our Phillips head's tendency to cam out as a feature that was very useful half a century ago before clutches and torque adjustable drivers became common. But they're still favored by drywallers and a few others today. So what if they strip out easily and then you have to extract them with special tools and a great deal of profanity? We're never going to admit that the Canadians can do something better than we can. So, while Robbies have remained largely a Canadian phenomenon, they are available in many countries around the world, including in most hardware stores in the United States. But we still look at their strange square heads as a mere curiosity as we reach past them for a box of Torx-headed screws and say, finally, a screw that won't cam out. Why didn't anybody think of that before? Want to see something else really interesting? The M-Power SBS sharpening station is an idea that was 4 years in the making, designed to provide everything you need right in one place so you can sharpen and strop your tools quickly and get right back to work. It begins with 3 diamond plates. There's 300, 600, and 1200 grit. After sharpening, you pop back on the magnetic stropping plates, which are color-coded to accept 3 levels of honing compound, including 1800, 2500, and 5000. When your tool's razor sharp, everything, including the compound sticks, the lapping fluid, it all goes back in the case. I like the simplicity of it. No more hunting around the shop for what you need. It is all in one place. In fact, I think it'll be just the thing to take with me when I travel. I like to carve when I'm on the road. If you're looking for a new system or a second one for working outside the shop, the M-Power SBS system is something you should at least take a look at.